This episode of the Culture Soup podcast is brought to you by the Center for Workforce Excellence. Veteran Fortune 500 executive and executive coach Trudy Bourgeios is offering not one, but 5 of her latest books for giveaways on the Culture Soup podcast. The name of the book, Equality: Courageous Conversations About Women, Men, and Race to Spark a Diversity and Inclusion Breakthrough. What do you have to do to get one of these books? Well, I want you to listen to the episode with Trudy and I in our conversation about authenticity. It's one in several of a series called Authentically SHE during the month of March for Women's History Month. First, you'll need to answer a trivia question. After listening to this episode, you'll need to go to my website at lmichellesmith.com, sign up for the newsletter, and the first 5 people to answer the question correctly will win one of the books. But now it's time for our show. Hey y'all, this is Culture Soup, where tech, culture, and business collide. It's a podcast that spoons up everything hot from social media. I'm your host, L. Michelle Smith, and each episode we bring you some of the most notable and not yet notable thought leaders in tech, business, and culture. I can't even begin to tell you the impact that my next guest has had on my career. And the fact that we only spent a total of 4 days in each other's presence at the Strategic Pathways workshop during the Executive Leadership Council's Leadership Week in 2016. I'm just sitting here shaking my head because this lady is so wise and so credible, so knowledgeable that many of the Fortune 500 trust their top executives to her as an executive coach. I'm talking about Trudy Bourgeios. She is a CEO of the Center for Workforce Excellence. She's an executive coach, and she is one of the faculty on staff at the Executive Leadership Council. Trudy has poured into many executives, including myself. In fact, if it wasn't for Trudy, I would not have crystallized the value proposition that has taken me so far. I'm not going to spend much more time talking to you about Trudy because Trudy has a lot to say. And if you listen to any of the episodes before this one, I've quoted Trudy often. Now hear her in her own voice. Here is part 2 of our Authentically SHE Women's History Month series. Trudy Bourgeios.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to see you. It's been a while.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, but I've been watching you, girl.
Oh, well, and I've been keeping up with you, too. I'm so excited about the book, and you'll get to talk about it a little bit more. But how about we have a Culture Soup moment?
Yeah, of course.
You ready? Okay, good.
Yeah, of course.
I have noticed that a ton of people on the internet, especially people who are in professions or they're entrepreneurs or maybe even just models, it doesn't matter. People are talking about building their personal brands. And what's part of that, I think, is authenticity, because so often people think that building your brand is just about what you put out there and not necessarily about what you've done. Now, there are people
Right.
who are out there that have made millions and made a brand for themselves after not really doing much per se.
Right.
But do you agree that you actually do have to do something and do something extraordinary in order to start crafting a brand that sticks?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, El Michelle, the thing is that personal branding is not new.
Mhm.
What is new is that the market has shifted. The economic situation, the global economy, the fourth industrial revolution has caused every company to be in a state of transformation.
Mhm.
So when we talk about personal branding today, we really have to say, what is the value proposition? See, people used to use a lot of descriptors that really didn't have substance. And what I really want to encourage people to do is to understand how what they do on a daily basis actually contributes to the bottom line ROI and profitability of the organization.
Mhm.
And so it's not about this notion of I'm going to represent myself in this elegant, well thought out way. It is about the value and the impact
Mhm.
that you can talk about directly, and it's got to be quantifiable.
Mhm.
So I think that we're in a new era where when we talk about personal branding, we're talking about leadership sustainability
Mm.
and impact, right? And so what the Marshall Goldsmith whole notion of what got you here won't take you there.
Mhm.
I think we've reached a point that a lot of the leadership lessons that we learned 10 years ago are no longer relevant. And because the workforce has changed and because the marketplace has changed, and most importantly, because the consumer has changed,
Mhm.
we need to rethink what personal leadership branding really means.
Wow. So how does authenticity play into it? Because there are a lot of folks that are out there trying to brand themselves,
Hmm.
but not very authentically.
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah. Well,
important to be authentic as
oh
your
my gosh, do you remember the fake it till you make it?
yes, which is
Well,
bull.
okay. So that was a phrase that came out when people didn't understand that their power really comes from their authentic diversity.
Mhm.
See, we really weren't celebrating each and every individual's contribution at that time. It was more like, okay, let's all just, get along to be along and da 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 da. And it wasn't really at the core of who you are. And see,
Mhm.
your brilliance, each of us has a natural sphere of brilliance, and that brilliance is connected to who we are authentically. And the thing that I really want to encourage anyone who's listening to our conversation today is to get in touch with the blood that flows through your veins.
Mhm.
You see, particularly as women of color and particularly as African Americans, we have been subjected to all kinds of rhetoric about who we are.
Yeah.
And that rhetoric sometimes has suggested that who we are is not good enough.
Mhm.
But the truth of the matter is that African Americans in particular are some of the most resilient people on the face of the planet.
Right.
We know how to navigate change
Mhm.
like nobody else's business. And what do organizations need now? They need leaders who can help others navigate
Sure.
change.
Mhm.
So if you can get in touch with who you are authentically, and you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again for the benefit of everyone who's listening, one of the most important activities that I ever did in my life was to go back and look at the 10 most defining moments in my life.
Mm.
And as I reflected on those defining moments, what I asked myself was, what was the lesson that the defining moment taught me?
Mhm.
And how does that lesson shape who I am authentically? And how can I now own this unapologetically
Right.
and say to the world, this is who I am, and this is why you want to know who I am.
Right.
This is why it's good for you to know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I need to be who I am, because when I'm there, I'm really good.
Okay.
When I'm trying to cover and be like somebody else,
right.
I'm not so good.
Well, I got to say, this is a great point to interject how we even know each other.
Oh,
Because you
awesome.
took us through this very exercise as a part of Strategic Pathways during Leadership Week, during the Executive Leadership Council's Leadership Week. And I remember, man, the tissues were flowing. I said, Trudy is going to make us cry. Because when you take that time to look at those 10 most defining moments, whether they're above the line or below the line, meaning whether there were valleys or peaks,
right?
It takes you back in a way that makes you own your story. And it's cathartic.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I know it was a moment for me because I probably hadn't voiced some things out loud that I knew about myself that needed to be voiced and owned.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
Gee, let me be proud of it. So
same for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I think a lot of women, particularly women of color, we are about the business of doing.
Mm-hmm.
We are really good at working, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know how to be workhorses,
right?
And to do what other people say and think that we should do. But I think the proposition and the invitation that you're extending to people is, hey, you can be authentic and you can be extremely successful, and you can go from being successful to being significant when you are playing to your authentic self. Because when you reveal those stories, like I shared with you about being 22 and my special needs son being born and it knocking me on my behind, and me, having to reconcile with what really is truly meaningful in life, and discovering my own resilience and my own appetite for equality. And so much of what I do today really, comes from obviously being raised in the Deep South, being born into segregation, but then having, a special needs son, and then having a daughter who ultimately married a wonderful man who is Caucasian, and my family, is Creole, and, just trying to ensure that people understand that at the core of everyone is a story. And if we could slow down enough to hear and listen and really understand the stories, my goodness gracious of life, what could we do to change this planet?
And I know my listeners are probably going, wow, okay, who is this woman? She is dropping gems like in the first 10 minutes of this podcast. And I want you to share who you are, what you do, Trudy. And I mentioned a bit about how we met, but we'll talk a little bit more about Strategic Pathways. But tell us what it is that you do. And, I'm sure folks are like, I want to sit at this woman's feet already.
Oh, you're so kind. I feel very blessed, very fortunate that I get to use my gifts and talents to help other people achieve success. I'm really a teacher at heart. I'm a truth teller at heart. But I spent 18 years in corporate. So I have sat in the seat, before I left corporate, I was a vice president managing a $3 billion business unit and teams of thousands. And so I know what that drug feels like. And it is super, it's super hyping in that, many of us have been the first to get the good job. You know what I'm saying? Mom and dad sacrificed and worked 2 and 3 jobs to ensure that we had the education to be able to have the opportunity to get that good job. But, when I got that good job, you know what? I looked up one day and I looked in the mirror, and that good job was not good to me. And I was not authentic.
Well, and you even said that you didn't even know who you were looking at in the mirror anymore. We talked about this in the Black Enterprise interview about authenticity. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yes, I mean, it's a difficult truth to tell, and an even more difficult truth to swallow. But there came a day when I looked in the mirror, and yes, I could play corporate politics, like how people say you can be cut and you don't even know you're cut until you're dead. I mean,
Yes.
I really started to develop some behaviors that did not align with what I said was my value system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was no longer authentic. I
Mm-hmm.
really wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I had taken on male behaviors specifically. I mean, I was tougher than nails, and I didn't let them see me sweat, and I didn't, you don't know I care about you, and at night I would weep.
And by the way, that's toxic for males too.
It is.
Yes.
It is. And I think while men might not weep,
Mm-hmm.
I think in the silence of the night when there's no one else, I think that people long to connect with people in a very positive way. I think that people don't want to be laden with behaviors that discount people and belittle people and ignore people. I think that we are wired to love each other. And, that word love in corporate America is like, okay, where are you coming from? You got 5 heads. What are you talking about? Blah, 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 blah. But, when everything is said and done, no matter what industry that you work in, no matter what title you have, what function that you're in, your career will come to an end.
Right.
And when it does come to an end, people are not going to remember how many widgets you sold. They're not going to remember how many data points you analyzed. They're not going to remember how many customer outings that you went to. What they're going to remember is, how did you treat me?
Right.
And so at my authentic core is a strong desire for elevating, unleashing the best in others. And it's not because of me. And I think that we all have to recognize that it's bigger than us. What you're doing is to touch other people.
Right.
You're being used as a catalyst, right? And if each of us could show up in a way that we could be used for a greater good, I think that we could shift the landscape in the business world to be a place where everybody could be authentically valued.
That's so important, Trudy. And, sometimes I talk about my business, when I ran my business, and even what I do today, I'll speak of it as ministry. And I know it throws people. You don't have to be religious to understand what I'm saying. I think you articulated it very well. It really is about, what are you doing to touch other people in what you're doing, whether that is working with your colleagues or your workforce, or, the customers that are out there and the clients that you might have. How have you left them? Are they better after coming into contact with you? And I think
that's exactly right.
That working for the greater good, and boy, that gets me back to my TCU campaign. It actually is about for the greater good. But if you have that mindset, what kind of great work you could actually do.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head when you said, what kind of mindset, right? And so as we show up as leaders, that mindset of how can I serve and how can I use whatever it is that I bring to the table to allow you to be in your best space, to allow you to be in that authentic place, and for me to respect that and value that, and not try and make you be more like me or more like somebody else. The real opportunity in this day and age is to accept people from a mindset that everybody has value. Right? Everybody has value. If you're the introvert, you have value.
Right.
If you're the extrovert, you have value. If you're the analytic, you have value. If you're the gregarious one, you have value. If you're the naysayer, you have value. And so in our authentic place, when we know and when we believe that who we are at the core represents an opportunity for new growth, for new possibilities, then we play in that space of brilliance.
Right.
And everybody wins.
Absolutely. So these are the themes that come up in your book. You want to talk about the book? What's the name of it?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for just, talking about the book.
Absolutely.
This is my fourth leadership book. It's called Equality: Courageous Conversations About Women, Men, and Race to Spark a D&I Breakthrough. And, for almost 2 decades, just a year short of 20 years, I've been an entrepreneur now. And when I was in corporate, I was that champion for the underdog. I think I'm still that champion for the underdog. But I'm trying in this book to appeal to women as much as I am to men. I think we as women have a lot of work to do, particularly across differences. I mean, the truth of the matter is that white women have been the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action. And we haven't had that dialogue. They're not trying to be malicious in any way, shape, or form, but they have the seat. And we need to be okay with expecting that whoever is at the seat, whether she's brown, she's white, she's purple, she's blue, it doesn't matter, that she is going to reach back for the next generation of female leaders. And we have this window of time. History is calling us as female leaders to be stronger, to be bolder, to be louder, to be clearer, to be more convicted, and unapologetically say we bring value to the table. I mean, if you think about what companies are trying to do now, they're trying to advance more collaboration, they're trying to advance more innovation, they're trying to advance more inclusion. And, these are strengths that women bring to the table. Now, that's not to say that men don't bring strengths to the table. Hallelujah to the men who have pioneered and who have fostered this whole notion of possibility. And so people talk about men as allies. I don't talk about men as allies. I think that, I think that you don't get brownie points for being human.
Yeah.
You don't get brownie points for showing up and saying the right thing.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you. And that goes for not just men, but even when you're thinking about white privilege and, majority, just for doing what you're supposed to do. It's like with my daughter, I hate to liken it to my child, but she's 6 years old. If she brushes her teeth, we don't throw a party.
Correct.
You're supposed to brush your teeth.
Exactly. And we are supposed to treat each other as human beings. And so I think it's about a partnership. It's not about you being an ally or being, whatever other descriptors are out there. And that's not to belittle any of that language. I think that we continue to evolve our language and evolve our understanding of what it really is going to take to leverage diversity, equality, and inclusion to gain a competitive advantage. And I think that all of us have to recognize it doesn't matter where you are in the business, it doesn't matter what title, all of us need to embrace our role and our responsibility to be champions. Right. Champions for equality, champions for equal opportunity, champions to ensure that every voice is heard and not squelched, champions to accept that authentic engagement is beneficial. Like that's really a good thing, right? Being authentic is really a good thing. And not accepting silence, because in the book, one of the things that I talk about that is really important to me is I say that, people have to understand that when they sit on the sidelines and they view inequities, they experience them, they see them, and they say nothing, they're saying everything. Right. They're saying I'm okay with that. Right. And that's not okay. Right. Silence. So we got to find our voice. Absolutely. We got to find our voice and we got to use it.
Totally. You have a concept in the book called creating your own equality. I love that.
Thank you.
Tell us what we can do to create our own equality.
Well, the first thing that I think each of us has to do is to understand our value proposition. And you've heard me talk about this before, but most people don't understand how what they do on a daily basis actually impacts the bottom line for the organization that they're working for, right? And so when you are contributing value, it creates opportunity, it creates visibility, it creates optionality. And what I mean by that is, if I'm making a company $1 billion, somebody is going to listen to me.
Right. Exactly.
Now, on the flip side of the coin, if your stuff is raggedy, don't try this.
Exactly. Performance excellence is the key. That's rock bottom. That's table stakes.
That's
right?
it. That is table stakes. You get into the game because you are excellent, right? But then, as you have read, and hopefully others will read, as you're creating your own equality, you have to be likable. People like to do business. This is old phraseology, but people like to do business with they like and they trust and they know. And so we have to open up our hearts. We have to reveal more than we're probably comfortable with revealing, particularly as people of color, because, we were taught not to trust.
No.
Don't drive your Mercedes to the work. You bring that hoopty. You drive that Benz on the weekend.
You don't want to outdrive the boss or whatever. People are going to see that car. So
exactly.
Dumb it down.
Exactly.
Right.
I had one of my students who, in another class, like I met you in another class, he told me a story about realizing this point of really truly being authentic. He had a love for watches and really very nice watches. And he was afraid to reveal this passion that he had with one of his clients, because he didn't want to come across as being too over the top. And so his client started asking him, just in casual chit-chat, about watches. His client, too, was a lover of very exotic watches. And his natural, authentic brilliance just responded as the client started just talking about these different watches. And the client was like, "Who are you?" When did you get any knowledge about Piaget or Tag or Rolex or any of the advanced brands? And so it sparked a newfound connection that would have never come, would have never materialized, would have never been birthed had he not been willing to open his heart and touch that authentic
Let's
space.
back up a second, because you talk about likability, and I know that many of us have been taught, and I was glad to hear you say this back when I met you in 2016, that you're not there to be liked, you're there to be respected. And you said, no. People like to do business with people they like. Can you expound on that? Because I think that's so important.
People, I have heard, and I was taught that same thing about, well, you don't have to be liked. You have to be respected. I think that I call BS on that, because it's human nature. It's human nature to surround yourself with people that you like and trust. And in this book and in previous books, I talk about likable confidence. And it's this idea that you know who you are authentically. And you're comfortable with that, and you're not afraid to share that, and back to that mindset that we were talking about, right? You're showing up not to be braggadocious, not to be arrogant, not to be I'm going to outdo you, but what can I give to this relationship? People are attracted to that.
Yeah.
And when you show up sharing ideas and being able to talk about things that are important to others, people dig that.
Yeah.
And when you show up being interested in others instead of trying to sound interesting, people are like, "Oh my gosh, I like you."
Yeah.
And then when they like you, that's how sponsorship is born. That's how advocacy is born. That's how opportunity is manifested. So when you want to create your own equality, you got to get who you are, and you got to know your game. You got to know what value that you bring, but you got to bring it in a way that really appeals to others, that invites them to want to know more, not because of what you can do, but because of what you can do together.
So how do you overcome the fear? Because some people are fearful of this because it puts you on Front Street. And some people believe that either people are going to see that and they'll recoil because they say, oh, well, she's self-promoting. Or they'll recoil because, gee, it's just coming on strong. Or do they have a right to be afraid? Or is there a risk?
I think fear is natural. You know, I think that any new situation, all of us are fearful. You know, as a kid, you know, growing up in the Deep South, I was the first in my family to do many things. And was I afraid? Yes. And did people put me down? Yes. And did people say, you can't do it? Yes. But you, inside of that authentic self that you're talking about, you see, you got to be your best cheerleader and your worst critic. You got to know when you're good, and you got to know when you mess up and clean it up. And so, therefore, you are in this space of purity. That you know, it's really my intent to add value. And so you can pass through the fear. I don't want to lead anyone to misunderstand. The fear is going to come. It is a part of the human experience, a part of the human condition. The winners, the people who are successful, just are willing to take one step each day, each moment, each hour, to get past that fear. And the way that you get past that fear is practice. You just put yourself out there, right? It's like riding a bike. The first time that you rode a bike, you know, we were scared we were going to fall, and that's why we had the little, you know, training wheels. And eventually, somebody took the training wheels off. But you know, Michelle, the thing that really strikes me as the lesson that we should share with the listeners right now is you have to be in a state where you have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and you have to have a lifelong learning mindset. So you're always in fear. You're always learning something new. You're always stretching yourself beyond what you know today. And then when you step into that, it starts to get exciting.
Totally.
It starts to give you some energy. It's like, okay, let me see what I can do next.
Absolutely.
And that's what it's about in terms of creating your own equality.
Do you have any, like, if you were to name 3 things that people need to do to walk in their most authentic self? And I know that you've talked about a few of them, but if you could encapsulate 3 takeaways for the listeners today, what would they be?
Get in touch with your life's experience. So look back on everything that God has brought you through, and eke out of that the lessons that now contribute to who you are and what you stand for authentically. That's the first thing. The second thing may sound very Pollyannish, but it's about dreaming. It's about giving yourself permission to dream, no matter what stage that you're at. I mean, you know, I'm entering, you know, perhaps the last decade of my life, and I'm challenging myself to say, okay, I'm turning 60 this year. What is the new dream for me? What is it that
you have a couple more decades? Let me just say.
Thank you, God willing.
Think long game, Trudy.
Yes, I am. You know, often I'll say to people when they ask me this question, imagine that you're 85 or 90, and what is the story that you want told about your contributions to this earth? And so that's a way to get at that second point, which is, you know, really giving yourself permission to continue to dream. And then the third thing that I would say to people is do battle. And what I mean by that is every one of us has an itty bitty committee. Every single one of us. And that itty bitty committee says, you can't You shouldn't. Oh, it's too risky. Oh, they're not going to like you. Oh, you didn't say the right thing. Oh, battle, because the war is won in the battlefield of the mind and the heart on the inside. And so if you can do those three things, then you can wake up every day going, okay, let's see what cool things happen today.
Yeah.
Wow, let's do this. And even when stuff happens, and you and I both know, everybody who's listening know, as great as this all sounds, stuff happens. But here's what I have experienced. When you're in this mindset, in this space that we're talking about, when stuff happens, you go, okay, that's preparing me for something better.
Totally.
And you're just able to reset, right? And get back in the game and stay in the game and know that tomorrow is a new day, and God's mercies are new every morning, and really talk to yourself. So I just really encourage all the people who follow you to declare that they're going to build some new capabilities. This doesn't just happen overnight. It didn't just happen overnight for me. I had to fight through as a kid being called the N-word, being spat on, being rejected, being told no. I still, as an entrepreneur, almost 20-year entrepreneur, I still fight inequalities, what I bring to the table as a woman of color, a Black female entrepreneur. People want to pay pennies compared to what they do for the dominant group. But I think at the end of the day, I would wrap everything in a bow by saying, the choices that we make are not just about us. They're about generations to come.
Oh, that's good stuff. That's great, Trudy.
The Center for Workforce Excellence. It's workforceexcellence.com, and we're a national, now international training, consulting, coaching, and I speak and write, and I'm really happy that people are responding so well to this fourth book. Actually, I've got an itch to start writing again.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I've got a grandbaby. My first grandbaby is going to be coming. I have a special needs. We have a special needs son, and our daughter got married a couple of years ago. And as I shared with you earlier, she's married to Ryan, who is Caucasian, and I feel a pull, a tug to talk now about biracial kids, and talk about equality at a much earlier age in life than when you get to the corporate experience. So we'll see what God has in store.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you not just for coming on, but you're a sponsor of this absolute episode. So we're very excited about that. We thank you for that.
Thank you.
We're going to be giving away books.
I appreciate who you are and what you stand for, and I just want to encourage you to keep on keeping on. You're making a difference. I love what you're doing, and anytime that I can be a supporter for you, please count on me, because I know God's using you to make a difference in the world.
Well, thank you, Trudy. When I first met you, I was like, that lady right there is going to make a difference in my life, just from the few minutes that she stands up here every day for 4 days. And you absolutely have. I have taken the bits and pieces of what you shared with us from that week and moved my career along and moved my, industry presence along, all of this good stuff. So I really appreciate it.
Well, the best, you are so welcome. And my friend, the best is yet to come for you. You have a global presence that is building in scope. And I suspect that you're going to touch millions and millions of people. So God be with you.
Well, I appreciate that. That is the goal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, hon. All right, much love.
Wow. Ladies and men, if you don't have a new way to look at yourself, a new way to look at your career or your business, thanks to Miss Trudy Bourgeios, I don't know what you've been listening to for the past 30, 40 minutes. I hope that you took something away. Now, part 3 is coming up next week. We have PowerfulPenny.com herself, Cheryl Grace. You may know her as a senior vice president from Nielsen. She is a powerful corporate executive, but man, is she the best meaning of the word diva. You'll want to hear her. She's coming up next Thursday. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Culture Soup. We're online at theculturesoup.com. And guess what? We have a few more of Trudy's books to give away. So you need to go to my website, lmichellesmith.com, and sign up for the newsletter where you'll get the trivia questions, answer it, be the first one, and get a book. See you next week. The Culture Soup Podcast is a production of No Silos Communication.